What's up, gang? I am Graham Coffey. This is the DawgsCentral live show coming to you on a Thursday evening, February 22nd. Hope you guys are all doing well out there. Want to particularly send good thoughts and healing thoughts and hopes for healing to anyone and everyone in Athens who's been affected by the events of the last 24 hours, a couple of UGA students being lost. Definitely a tough thing to go through, especially for young people. Tragic to see young people lose their lives. So thinking about all of you guys, praying for all of you, and wishing you the best. So yeah. With that said, let's get into it a little bit. Kind of felt like we were hitting the doldrums of the off season, and then all of a sudden we find ourselves with Brian McClendon heading off to Tampa Bay to be the new wide receiver coach and passing game coordinator for the Buccaneers. And very quickly, it feels like we've sort of gotten right back into coaching carousel season. So, let's start with the report that I put out last night. Latest on Dell McGee and the Georgia Southern coach. Oh, sorry, that's wrong. It's supposed to say Georgia State. Sorry about that. Live TV. Tons of fun. That's better. Okay. So Dell McGee and Georgia State. I put out a report last night with the help of Jason Brazel, my partner over at DawgsCentral, that McGee has been, offered the job. I want to put it this way. Nobody in college sports has ever offered a job until the ink is dry on their contract, right? So, from an administrative standpoint, Georgia State isn't going to say that they've offered anybody the job until they're announcing who the new hire is. I am confident in our reporting that Dell McGee has been offered the job. He has agreed to his compensation with Georgia State. He is in the process, or went through the process today, of negotiating his assistant pool and talking about, kind of what those things are going to look like in terms of financial support from the university and all of those issues. Anyways, point being, this is far enough along to where McGee and Georgia State are talking about the details and, in the weeds in that kind of way. So I feel confident in saying that everything is still tracking towards him being the next head coach at Georgia State. I would not be surprised if that is announced as soon as tomorrow being Friday. You probably will see an introductory press conference, I think, early next week. So congratulations to him, first of all. He's been at Georgia since Kirby Smart's original staff was assembled. One of the original hires. Him and Schumann are the last two remaining original hires from Kirby Smart's first staff in 2016. And he's been really a cornerstone of what Georgia does. And, kind of talking about what he did, I think, is a good way to sort of talk about what Georgia will be looking for once this becomes official and he finds himself as the new head coach down there in Atlanta. Dell was a high school coach in the state of Georgia from, I believe, 2005 to 2012 at Carver Columbus High School, and played his high school football in Columbus, was a guy who played his college ball in Auburn. He is, SEC through and through, but also Central Georgia high school football through and through. And when you talk about Dell's impact on the program, yes, you're going to talk about the running back position. You're going to talk about him, helping recruit James Cook and him being good enough at his job to where Nick Chubb and Sony Michel, came back for that 2017 season because they felt like there was more that they wanted to learn, both from him and Kirby and just from the college experience. There's a lot that he's done from a running back standpoint, but also he created a level of trust between Georgia and their staff and Kirby Smart and what he was doing and the entire state of Georgia and then the high school kind of football apparatus in the state of Georgia. Like Dell was a guy that everyone trusted because he had sat in the seat that all of those high school coaches have sat in and understood their challenges, knew what their lives looked like on a day in, day out basis and understood, who they were as people, really. So I think that is the thing that you're really trying to replace here is who is that kind of go between. And I'm not saying that the high school coaches don't trust Kirby Smart on his own. They do. But with McGee in the fold, there was always kind of that other guy there that I think high school coaches looked at and said, like, there's one of us here on staff, in Athens, and he is helping, guide things. And if he says it, we can trust him. So one of the names that was thrown around a lot in the wide receiver coaching search and in the early hours of that was Arkansas running back coach Jimmy Smith. Jimmy Smith was the head coach at Cedar Grove, I think, for 6 years. Before that, he was an assistant there for 6 years, spent 12 years coaching high school football in the Atlanta area. That's the guy, like, in my opinion, assuming everything crosses the finish line as it appears to be heading in the direction of with McGee and Georgia State, the guy that you go and get is Jimmy Smith, because he checks those boxes from a developmental standpoint, what he did with Rocket Sanders in 2022, turning that kid into a 1,400-yard rusher. I think Arkansas in 2022 had, if I'm not mistaken, their best ever season ever from a rushing standpoint. I think they were 7th nationally in rushing yards, and we're at a really healthy per carry average. So that is the guy that I would want to go get. If I am Kirby Smart, I'm sure Sam Pittman is going to do absolutely everything he can to keep Jimmy Smith there. I don't know if this just comes down to straight money, though. Like, if it comes down to straight money, I think Georgia will do what they need to do to get their guy within reason. I think, though, the opportunity, if you're a guy like Smith who obviously loves Sam Pittman, has been loyal to Sam Pittman, came with Pittman to Arkansas, but that regime at Arkansas might not be trending in the most healthy direction at this point. I don't think that's a controversial thing to say, that if Arkansas has another bad season, they might be going through a coaching search of their own there. And so if you're Jimmy Smith and Georgia comes calling and asks you to come coach running backs, you get to come back home, basically, an Atlanta guy, and all of a sudden you're in a place where you have probably the most secure coaching staff in the country. Like, Kirby Smart's going to be the coach of Georgia until he doesn't want to be, would be my opinion today. So that is the direction that I think things would go. And I think that could move quickly. So the natural question after that is, where is UGA on the front of replacing Brian McClendon? There's been a lot of different names that have kind of floated around. Smith was one of them in the early going. Obviously, he'd be a better fit, I think, as the running back coach, because that's what he's coaching right now. But the two names that I'm kind of watching closest at this hour are Georgia Tech receiver coach Josh Crawford and former Georgia OC quarterback coach, wide receiver coach, assistant head coach, I think at one point, James Coley, which I know a lot of Georgia fans, when they hear that name, might not be super thrilled with the idea of, like, James Coley coming back, because 2019 was a very rough year for Georgia offensively. I think the thing that I would remind everybody of is, like, there's a very big difference between, the things and skills that are needed from a position coach versus the skills that are needed from a play caller. I think Coley is a good offensive mind. There's a difference between being a good offensive mind and being somebody who necessarily adjusts well in game or makes good decisions when the play clock is running down. Like, you have to make decisions quick as an offensive coordinator in the booth. And Georgia's 2019 offense was limited in some ways from a personnel standpoint, but I obviously I think there were things that they could have done better, and Kirby Smart agreed, and that's why he brought Todd Monken in. So Coley was Georgia's wide receiver coach in 2016 and 2017. In particular, I thought he did a really good job with Mecole Hardman, Terry Godwin, Javon Wims, Riley Ridley. Like, I thought he got a lot out of those guys, and obviously was an ace recruiter. Like, if we're talking, Coley, yes, he recruited a lot of offensive talent, but he also brought in a lot of guys from the state of Florida that were not in his position room. Like, he has deep South Florida ties going way back. He's a Miami guy. He was, involved with Tyson Campbell's recruitment, was involved with the George Pickens recruitment. He was primary recruiter for Dominic Blaylock. He was primary recruiter for Tyreek Stevenson. Helped out heavily with James Cook coming out of Miami. Like, the dude acquires talent, and there's two arguments that you could make there. One is like, it's the NIL era. Everybody just go and buy a roster. Well, I think that, we've all seen that is a dangerous line to walk for a lot of programs. Like, if you're only going out and landing guys that are making decisions solely based on NIL, then you're probably going to have some team chemistry issues. Like, we saw that at Texas A&M when Coley was on staff there. And obviously that wasn't him driving that decision process. But I would expect for Georgia, to Kirby Smart with his hires this offseason has continued to prioritize recruiting. Dante Williams, all these guys, like, they are recruiters. And I think if you bring in Coley, he's a recruiter. If you bring in Josh Crawford, also a recruiter. Crawford is very good recruiter, another guy with deep Georgia ties, was on that Western Kentucky staff with Tyson Helton, I believe, and that whole crew up there that was very explosive, was one of the leading passing attacks in the country. I think he was the outside wide receivers coach for that staff. Like, so good mixture of development with recruiting skills. Coley's probably your more established, higher floor kind of, known commodity. Crawford, young up and comer kind of guy. Not saying he's super young, but like, he's, probably a guy that, you may have the potential to kind of promote up through the ranks over the years, and he might take on some bigger roles on your staff as time goes on. Coley, I think, can come in and be very effective for Georgia, help out in a lot of ways, be a very big asset on the recruiting trail, but I'm also just not sure if he is, I think you hire him to coach wide receivers, and that's probably what he's going to do for the duration of his time. So we'll see how it pans out. I'm interested in watching it all kind of play out. I think that if you're a Georgia fan at this point, there shouldn't really be any anxiety over Kirby Smart making these types of hires. Like, losing McGee is a big deal, but I also think, Kirby's kind of established what's going on at Georgia well enough at this point where I think you can manage that loss a lot better than you might have been able to manage it pre-2021, 2022 when you won the back-to-back national titles. What Georgia's accomplished under Kirby kind of speaks for itself now. You're not really selling, the potential of the future. You're selling the known things that have already happened. So that is my 2 cents on that, basically. Moving on, you also have some, other things happening in the Georgia football world besides all this coaching stuff. I do have some questions from our users. If you're watching on YouTube and you have a question, feel free to drop it in the chat. Start out with this one. Carson Beck is currently the Heisman favorite. Do you think he has a realistic shot at winning it? I do. Yeah, I do. I think he has a realistic shot at winning it. I think that Carson is an easier sell as a Heisman candidate than, like, say, Stetson was, because Stetson was always kind of like saddled with like the 2-star walk-on kind of label, the JUCO transfer, all of that. Like, I think people, struggled to understand how good he really was because they had this like preconceived notion of what his talent level really was, and I think that they were tripped up by that at times. Like, there was a lot of people in college football media who spent years saying, Stetson can only be a game manager. And then he started doing things beyond that. And they said, well, Stetson can be a really good college quarterback, but he's never going to be an NFL prospect because he doesn't have the physical talent. And then obviously he, shows that he has the physical talent, that he has the arm strength, and he ends up becoming a 3rd-round pick in the NFL draft. I think with Beck, it's a lot easier for the mass college football media to look at things and say, this dude's 6'4", he's 200 something pounds. Like, he's got the size and the arm strength of your prototypical NFL kind of pocket passing prospect. And that registers and computes, I think, a lot better for people. If you're the starting quarterback, especially a returning starting quarterback on a team that is in the national title hunt, you're always going to have a chance at the Heisman Trophy, especially if you're an established winner like Georgia is at this point. Like, yeah, I think he has a realistic shot at winning it. The question is going to be stat-wise, like, how does Georgia manage that? The interesting thing about Georgia quarterbacks over the last couple of years, like Carson in 2023 and Stetson in 2022, is that in reality, their best statistical games were often against the best teams that Georgia played. And Georgia would kind of, not really run a lot of stuff that they wanted to, keep off tape until they were playing better teams that, they thought would be more competitive with them, or that would at least have a shot to be more competitive with them. Like, Beck's 2 best games, in my opinion, last year were against a ranked Kentucky team and against a ranked Ole Miss team. So this year, with the schedule being longer and with the difficulty that Georgia has with road games at Texas, Ole Miss, Alabama, you have a road game at Kentucky in week 2. Like, I don't know if Georgia's kind of used games as practice at times the last couple of years, if we're being honest here. Like, they've often kind of run game plans in certain situations where it's like, we want to work on this before we get to the end of the season and play in elimination games. Like, I think in 2024, if there's a good chance Georgia will play 16 or 17 games next year. Like, I think you got to go out there and you got to blow people out. Like, you got to get Carson Beck out of the game, as early as you can. And so that probably does lend itself towards like him, having some games where it's, maybe Carson only had 16 to 18 attempts, but, he threw for 15 yards an attempt in this game and threw for a couple touchdowns, and like Georgia was explosive on offense and all of that good stuff. I think that's kind of how you have to play it. So it'll be interesting to see. And we obviously won't know until we know with that kind of thing. I think that season opener against Clemson is going to set a tone for him in a major way. Like, Stetson's 2022 game against Oregon was when people kind of started to say like, oh, all right, this dude just threw for 300 yards. He made some plays with his legs. Like, I think Beck can kind of make an early statement against Clemson. You go to Kentucky on the road in week 3. That's another opportunity. And then you get the Bama, Texas, Ole Miss games. Like, people are going to be watching Georgia all year. And I don't think that Georgia has to go 12-0 through the regular season for him to be in serious Heisman conversation. The Heisman is not totally a quarterback award, as we saw with Devontae Smith, but it's become a quarterback focused award for sure. And so I think for Georgia, you kind of look around the rest of the country, like, you could argue that Carson Beck is maybe the most known commodity in the country this year, coming into this year at quarterback. Other guys will emerge for sure, but like, voters for the Heisman are going to know his name, and they're going to hear it a lot over the next 6 months. And then they're going to hear it a lot throughout the season, and they're going to hear it a lot from NFL people. And there's going to be a consistent conversation around Carson Beck and his play. And I think that will help him because, there's not a Caleb Williams coming back next year. Like, there's not a Drake May. There's not even really a Bo Nix, honestly, like for 2024. I mean, who's the guy, like, other than Beck? Like, I know we don't think Jalen Milroe is winning a Heisman, do we? Like, we don't really believe that he's winning a Heisman with his arm unless something changes dramatically. At least I don't. I'm happy to eat crow if he proves me wrong. I don't have anything against the kid. Dylan Gabriel, man, a good player for sure, but like, he's going to be up at Oregon, and he could have a really good season, but with what Nix just did, I think that might actually sort of discount his results somewhat. You got Nico at Tennessee. That offense has the ability to put up big stats. Let's see. The kid's played one game, let's see. I don't know. Quinn Ewers at Texas is one to watch for sure. Like, I think him and Beck might be the two, kind of 1A, 1B in terms of just like best quarterbacks coming back in 2024. But yeah, there's not the whole sort of, deep roster of Heisman favorites like there has been in years past. Got a question here from Kiss My Grits. Love that username. Very excellent. Thank you for joining us tonight, Mr. or Mrs. Grits. Are you shocked that the CFP committee are already talking about a 14-team playoff and we haven't even kicked off a 12-team format? I'm not shocked by anything at this point. Do I like it? Absolutely not. I think we've seen the CFP committee and the general college football decision-making apparatus does not make decisions for folks like me or you. Like, if you're the type of person that is watching a show, a live stream with me in late February at 9:00 at night, then you're not the college football fan that these people are trying to reach. These people are trying to reach your brother-in-law who does not watch college football for, the first 3 months of the season, but when it's Christmas time and his in-laws are getting on his nerves and it's slow and everybody's, hanging out during the holidays, he slips off and he, turns on a college football game as a distraction. Like, that's the guy who college football is trying to reach. And that sucks. Like, it's tragic's probably too strong of a word, but like, it is a really sad situation because this sport has always had the best regular season of any sport. And that is what has made it, I think, so dramatic and has brought us like so many memorable moments over the years, is that you can have a week 6 game in college football where it feels like the entire world is on the line. I don't know if you're going to get that as much now. I think that the college football playoff committee, like, they're not running a postseason that is designed to crown a champion that's indicative of who the best team was throughout the year. I don't think that they're running the postseason necessarily from the viewpoint of, how can we put out the best product? I think that they're running a pro season from how can we put out the best television product? Like that is what is driving all of this is money. That's what's driving everything in college sports these days. 14 is such a weird number, but so is 12. I don't know why we skipped over 8, but yeah, like the idea that we're already expanding the 12-team playoff before we've ever played a 12-team playoff seems a little bit like outside the realm of sensical action. I think that there needs to be some sort of trial and error here. I have been a very large proponent of getting rid of these 4 conference champions automatically getting the top 4 seeds, because I think if you're going to have a seeding system, then that seeding system needs to be accurate 1 through 12. You need to have the 12 best teams put in order 1 through 12. That way the results are fair. Like if you're, let's say that you're the 7th best team in the seeds, and all of a sudden, you have to play some SEC championship game loser who was 12-0 in the regular season and got upset by a team that's probably inferior but is actually the best team in the country. Like you're going to be pissed, and you should be. So should somebody if they get to play, like the 4th seed being a 4-loss Arizona team who's a Big 12 champion. That screws up the whole order of everything. So there needs to be that getting rid of too. I think honestly, this 14-team playoff is probably a proposition, at least from what I've read and seen and talking to a few people. Like it seems like this is just a way for the SEC and Big Ten to secure more spots in the deal. I don't have a problem with that necessarily, but I kind of do, I guess, truthfully, just because like if 5 of the 12 best teams are from the SEC one year, then put those teams in, or 5 of the 14. I don't care how many it is. If 7 of the best 12 teams are from one league, then put those teams in. I don't care, but let's also not go allocating spots before a season happens. Like I've seen some years where the SEC is weaker than others. I've seen some years where like, yeah, they probably do have 4 of the 12 best teams. I've also seen some years where they don't. And that's true for the Big Ten, especially as well. I mean, let's be honest, like you get Ohio State and Michigan fighting it out for the first spot for the last 2 decades or so in the Big Ten. And then you got Penn State occasionally being competitive, but like just because Penn State's 10-2 in the Big Ten or 9-3 in the Big Ten doesn't make them one of the 12 best teams. Because I've seen Penn State go 10-2 a lot without beating anybody. So no, let's stop allocating playoff spots before we even know what the teams look like. There might be a year where the Big 12 needs 2 bids or 3 bids or whatever. Let's just get the 12 best teams or 14 or whatever the number is, put them on the field. Let's stop pandering to what we think the sport is going to look like in a decade, and let's respond to what the sport looks like in real time every year. That seems like the sensible action. Yeah, you make a good point here. Agree with all your comments. I wouldn't care if UGA ever played for an SEC championship game again. I'd rather have that week for the team to rest and heal. I've talked about this on Twitter a good bit this week, but there is an argument to be made that in a lot of years, you probably would rather be the 3rd team in the SEC than the 2nd team and have to go play against, let's say you've got, I'm just hypothetically speaking, let's say you've got LSU and Alabama, and they're both kind of the 2nd and 3rd team in the SEC, and then you got Georgia as the 1st team, for example. Like if I'm LSU or Bama, I would much rather start my playoff run having not gone and gotten beat up by the best team in the country. Like, let me sit out. I don't care about the automatic bid, the chance that I might get an automatic bid if I pull off an upset when I'm a 10-point underdog. No, like rest your guys and move on. So that is my opinion. Moving on. This is from Joe. Do you think Georgia adds a quarterback during the next transfer portal window? I think they'd like to. I think, yeah, I mean, they definitely would like to be at the four scholarship quarterback spot. I know that Kirby Smart has, I think, been pretty outspoken about wanting four scholarship quarterbacks. One thing that is interesting about the whole quarterback depth situation is that I've been told by a couple of people that like seeing what happened to Florida State last year made an impression, not just on Kirby, but I think on a lot of coaches throughout the country. Seeing a team who went undefeated in the regular season, but like really became rudderless when their starting quarterback went down. That's the type of thing that freaks coaches out because especially now moving into an era with this expanded playoff, like you don't want to be sitting there with a team that you think is the best in the country or one of the best in the country that is just totally hamstrung by one position. That's just a shitty place to be, and coaches aren't going to want to be in that spot. So I think Georgia is really like approaching this as we want three quarterbacks, not that, are on scholarship. We want three quarterbacks that we feel like can go in and play and win football games, win competitive football games. I think that Georgia has made kind of some significant commitments from an NIL standpoint. Sorry, from an NIL standpoint to secure guys that were on their roster who they didn't want to leave. Like I think Georgia, is really, really trying to stack the depth in that room. They like Puglisi a lot, so that will factor into this. Like he's already kind of shined a little bit. But I don't think they want to be in the spot where they're going to have to play a true freshman or anything like that. So, yeah, if there's a guy out there who, let's say, like is similar to Jaden Mayava, who almost came to Georgia, where lots of potential, has a lot of tools, but probably needs a year to kind of really learn the offense and understand what the challenge is going to be like week in and week out at this high P5 level that wants to, come to a place where he's going to have a shot to win a national championship and start for a season or two, then Georgia will definitely, I think, get involved from a portal standpoint. All right. How confident is Georgia about Jared Wilson's predicted performance at center next year? Feels like a critical position we're replacing. That's from Ben. It's definitely a critical position, no doubt, Ben. I'm with you, man. Yeah, Cedric Van Pran was so good for so long for Georgia that I think you kind of forgot he was there. And in some ways, that I think that's a compliment often for offensive linemen. Like he was just so steady that, you forget he's there because you're not seeing low snaps or high snaps. You forget he's there because guys aren't coming through the A gaps when he's in a football game. Like occasionally, he'd come around and pancake somebody, and then you remember that the Big Ced was playing. But he was great for Georgia, both on field and off the field. He was a very big team leader. I think that's going to be probably harder to replace, than his on-field production. Not that he wasn't productive, but I had, some people, multiple people who watched, large portions of fall practice last year tell me that Jared Wilson is elite. That was the word used, is elite. Not he's good, not we like him, not we think he has a lot of potential. They think that kid has the potential to be, a high round draft pick and another guy who's in the conversation as the best center in the country. The best news for Georgia is that he spent the last couple of years like he was Van Pran's little brother. He followed that guy everywhere. He, took reps behind him, taking shadow reps. Like he learned as much as he could from Cedric Van Pran while he was around. And, I think kind of understands the what he's trying to replace, and is eager to take on that responsibility and is probably enlivened by that challenge. So I think it's good news for Georgia that, he kind of stayed around. I think there was a period there where, maybe a year ago or so, like he realized he's very good and that he could play right away almost anywhere else. Decided that, he wanted to start and be the center at Georgia one day instead of transferring out. And I think that's decision is going to pay off for both parties in this case. So I'm not concerned about him. Confidence, I would say, is very high for if the bar is like, replacing an All-American. I think that you should feel pretty good about his chances of sliding in there and, having a pretty good beat on things right off the bat. All right. What else do we have here? I think that's it, guys. Unless any of you guys have any more questions. Yeah. So just to recap, if any of you joined late, because it looks like there's a lot of people that are live viewing right now. Just feel very good about our reporting on Del McGee that we put out on Wednesday night. Expect him to be the next head coach at Georgia State. Believe that things are almost all the way finalized there. I know that he had a meeting with the folks at GSU today, getting all the details hammered out on assistant pools and all of those things. So, yeah, I expect him to, be the head coach at Georgia State, and I expect that announcement to be very, very soon. Other than that, keep up with us. Keep up with me on Twitter. You can find me on Twitter at Graham, Graham, Coffee, COFFEY, DC. You can also read all of the inside notes and find out about all the things that are going on behind the scenes over on the DawgsCentral forum at the Players Lounge. So I'd love to see you guys there. Hope you all have a excellent end to your week and a fabulous weekend. And once again, sending thoughts, prayers, good vibes, and all the love that we have to everybody in Athens that's dealing with some of the scary stuff that's been going on there last 24 hours. Thinking about you guys.